morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to another DxO webinar. I'm your host, Photo Joseph, yet again here to show you all the good fun stuff that we've got from the DxO labs. So, what is today's agenda? We've got a lot of stuff to cover today inside of FilmPack, and here's one of the fun things that I'm going to do is typically when I show FilmPack, I just open FilmPack because it is a standalone app, and I open photos from there, right? You browse to a folder, you pick out a photo. I'm going to do that today, but I'm also going to show you how to get to FilmPack from DxO Photo Lab, Lightroom Classic, and Photoshop. And there are a couple of different things to know about each one of those processes. And so we're going to go through all that just so that you know, even if you are, or no matter what photo management app you're using, you will see a way to get into Photolab other than simply opening up the native raw image, because sometimes that's not what you want. Sometimes you want to do some work before you get to Photolab. Maybe you want to do some exposure correction, retouching, cropping, anything like that. You can do that beforehand and then send it over. So we're going to be covering that. As you can see on the description here, I'm not going to read through everything, but we're going to be exploring Time Machine. We're going to be exploring black and white, the color grading of kind of a cinema look, if you will. It's a bit of an arbitrary concept, but we're going to play with it. Textures and light leaks, and also we're going to explore the film stocks, which is kind of a cool way to do virtually no work at all, but to then impart a really interesting, unique look to your images. So with all that said, let's get this thing started, shall we? We are going to start in FilmPack on its own. I am going to turn off my camera to free up a little more room on your screens. I will turn that back on when we come back to the Q&A. So we're going to start with this photo here. This is a raw picture, you can see, so there's nothing at all done to the photo yet. We're inside of FilmPack. And incidentally, let me just back up for a second. The way that you get to any given folder, you click on this little folder icon, it opens up your standard open dialog, and you can choose the folder you want. And then there we go. Now we're looking at it. So I'll go ahead and open this picture. And I want to explore this new thing in Photolab 6 called Time Machine. If you look over here on the right, there's this button called Time Machine. We are going to come back into these looking through the various filters. But if I go to Time Machine, it opens up a couple of windows by default. And just a quick little tour of this because this is new. This is, the idea here is that we can explore photo styles based off of the era. So right now we're looking at, if you look at these the previews over here, the thumbnails on the right, very old style looking photos because we are in 19th century edition. So this is like, late 1800s of what we're looking at here. So obviously it's all black and white, except for some kind of strangely hand painted type of color looks, which really don't work well with her. And worth pointing out, by the way, not every filter works with every photo. Definitely something to consider. Anyway, so you have these different eras in here, and you go to like, let's look at the 1900s, let's look at the 1910s, and so on. But what's really clever is you look over here on the left, and you get a bit of a history of that era. Each one of the presets, maybe not each one of the presets, but many of the presets have descriptions over here on the left. If you see a look that you like, you can just click on it and it gives you a bigger version of that photo. There's a bit of photo history in here, which is, I gotta say, is really kind of a cool thing to do. Go through and start reading all these little photo history vignettes and you'll learn a bit about photography, which is kind of neat. And now there is a brand new feature for those of you who are already using FilmPack 6 but haven't yet updated to 6.1, which obviously is a free update. It used to be that you had a list of the renderings down here. You say it says 1913 cheese. I would then have to close this, go over here and find that 1913's cheese in here. It's a cute name. You have to find it in here. I know where it is. Let's see here, there it is. So I'd have to find it and click on it. But now, look at this. That little thing is actually a button. I can access it from here, or without even opening the big view here, I can just click on the little button right there, and it applies that preset. So this is a really nice little addition that's just been added in the most recent update. So definitely grab that update. It just makes that whole process so much easier. So the idea here, again, being that you're exploring different film types based off of the era. And it's not necessarily just a film type. Sometimes it's a treatment type. It's an aging process. It's a whole combination of things. I mean, it's not just about looking for, Ektachrome, 64, that probably wasn't a thing, but you are looking at photos of the eras. So like, I really like this old Charles Lindbergh photo. That's kind of cool. Let's apply a preset that has that same look to it. This is a real classic photo here. Everybody's seen this one before, Grand Central Station. We add that, and you know what? It doesn't work here. Why doesn't it work? Well, because there's no huge highlight beams. You can see there's these beautiful highlight beams, really enhanced. Yeah, great, we're seeing it in that corner, but it just doesn't work for the rest of the photo. So again, it doesn't mean that every single preset's going to work, but you scroll through and you find something that you like. Let's go into some color ones. Let's get into the 60s here. We start to see some color showing up in here. This is kind of a cool, this Woodstock Polaroid one. Neat thing too, you'll notice these descriptions, some of the buttons actually open up a larger version of the description. They don't all do that, some of them do. And if they do that, then it pops up, as you saw, into a, wrong button there, pops up into a little window on the left. So you'll see these different presets popping up in there along with their descriptions. So again, let's go into the 80s here and try some more. Jean-Michel Basquiat, let's try that. Pretty cool look. So all of these are just a really fun and clever way to explore the different looks. So I love this. I absolutely love this. Not only is it a neat way to explore different looks on here, but it is also a great way to learn a little bit about photography. And I want to point out too that just because you start with this, this is basically a preset. This doesn't mean that this is the end all result. So let's say I really like the tones of this photo, but I'd like it to be a little bit less crunchy in the shadows. It's a little bit too dark. And, let's get rid of some of the grain. This is really grainy. If I go in 1:1, it's just a little bit too grainy for this photo. I want to back that off a little bit. So at this point, maybe I'm not trying to mimic an era. I don't care. I just want the photo to look good. And right now, this photo looks a little bit too dark in there. So let's change that. If you go up here, click on this little button, this opens up the full editor, and here you have access to all the different adjustments that went into this. Now, there is a basic color rendering, which you can adjust the intensity on. I will say that sometimes when you play with this slider, weird things happen to the image. Some of these are really designed to work at whatever intensity they're first dialed in at. So you might find if you drag the slider on some of these that the image kind of freaks out. If that happens, just double click on it to reset it back to its default intensity and move on to another adjustment to play with the settings on there. So like I said, I wanted to back off on the grain. So if let's go into 100%, because that's always a good way to do grain adjustments. And we say we can see that it's a Kodachrome 200. Intensity's not that high. I mean, it's right in the middle range in there. It's not crazy high. But if I take that all the way down to 0, you'll see all that grain goes away. If I take it all the way up to the top, the grain gets cranked up to 11. So let's just dial it back a little bit and find a different grain in there that I think is a little bit more appropriate. So I kind of like right about there. Here's a neat thing too. This drop down simulates the grains for different size film stocks. So even though this is a little bit odd to see 24 by 36, that's actually what it means is 35mm film. That's the actual measurement of 35mm film. So that's the preset that we're looking at, but we can look at a medium format film stock, which is typically going to be less grainy, or even a large format film stock. You can even do a custom one there as well, but I'll leave it back down here at the default of the 35mm and maybe back that off a little bit. So I like the grain better that way, so that's cool. Let's leave it there. Now let's zoom back out and take care of those shadows. So there's a variety of ways we can do that. We could take the whole exposure up, but again, that is going to blow out those highlights a bit, so I don't want that. Maybe that's a little bit too dark. Let's bring it up just a touch like so. I could maybe play with the contrast, but down under the contrast slider, you'll see we have our highlight, midtones, and shadows adjustments. So let's bring up our shadows a touch in there. I think that'll help. Yeah, we can start to see some of that detail coming in the darkest areas. Or if that's not quite going to do it, we could go into the tone curve and let's go to our luminance curve, which is going to be our RGB curve. And maybe we want to brighten it up, kind of give us a little bit of a, what do you call that? A faded shadow look. That actually works pretty well for that image there. Or I can leave my black point down and just bring up the shadows like so. And then pull the highlights back down a little bit. Got to be careful when you're doing a reverse S curve. You could end up in a very solarized look very quickly, which is not going to be good for anything. But there, we're getting to something I like. We're getting some of that shadow detail in there. And there you go. And you go, yeah, cool. I like it. I like it a lot. So it's the whole point here is you have these really fun ways to explore different looks. We're going to see other ways to explore looks as well, just going through the base presets. But having this whole time machine concept is a really neat way to look at photos by the era. I mean, if you think about, like, let's say that you're creating an ad campaign for a client and you want to create photos that have a 1970s vintage look to them. Well, what is 1970s vintage look? I mean, you can go out and do a whole bunch of research and do a bunch of Googling of old photos and try and find a bunch of photos that have that look and then go in and try and match the colors on there. Or here in FilmPack, you can just go in and pull up the 1970s category and click through the options that are in there. It really can save a huge amount of time, and it's going to be accurate because somebody's already done all of this research for you, and it's all being presented here nice and easy to get to. So just one of those things to think about. If you're looking for an image in a particular era, if you want to make an image look like it's from a particular era, this is a great way to go. The last thing I'll just throw out here, I've done this in demos before. I'm not going to do it again here, but I'll just mention it. keep in mind that, like I'd said at one point in here, not every preset works for every photo. And the example that I've given before is if you take a photo of, let's say, a Tesla, it's a brand new car, and then you apply a look to it, a vintage look that looks like it was shot on daguerreotype. Well, okay, no one's going to believe that that's legit. But if you take a photo like this one here, this young woman wearing some kind of ratty clothing and kind of a warehousey construction, because where it was, type of a site, and there's nothing about this photo that says, oh, this was shot in 2019, then you can get away with applying a look to it that might bring it back in time a little bit. But keep in mind things like the clothing. Like if I tried to put a look on here, oh, let's go back to the daguerreotype example again. Did women really have that type of clothing back then? Probably not. So maybe it wouldn't really be appropriate. So just things to think about. Make your look match the content of the photo, and you can then sell that photo concept much better. I don't mean sell for money. I mean, convince your audience that that is what it's supposed to look like. It just works out a lot better. Anyway, enough of a lecture. Let's get back into playing in here. I see there has been a question has come up. Milko has said, is there a possibility with FilmPack 6 to add grain but not change the colors? Okay, so you would have to play with the different grain patterns. Some grain patterns will alter the color because they are mimicking a particular film stock, and they are trying to simulate what that would look like shot on that film, and the color shift within the grain pattern is part of that. Some of them are not. So I would actually say if you wanted to add grain without affecting the color, look for black and white film stocks, because those are probably going to work the best. In fact, let's just try that right now. Let's give that a try. Let me turn off my camera, zoom back into 100%, and let's go up to the grain. Here we are. Where are we? Grain. There we go. And so if I bring this intensity way up, we can see some color shifting happening in there. It's not super intense, but there is certainly some color noise happening. Okay, well, let's see what happens if I try this as, let's go for a not color slide film, color black and white film. There we go. And I'm going to go for a really grainy one. Let's go for like a T-Max 400 and back that off. And yeah, you can see there is definitely much less of a color hit to it. So that's how I would go about doing that. I would choose a black and white film stock and do that. I want to try something else here. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen if I go to no grain, just turns it off. Okay, I wasn't sure if there was still going to be like a generic slider. So yeah, that's what I would do. Oh, and by the way, you have this current film rendering, so if you do have a film stock chosen, it will match that in here, so you don't have to go and match it manually. So in this case, it would be the Kodachrome 200 that matches that. So there you go. So yeah, that's how I would do that. I think that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that, and I think that's a good way to do it. I'm just going to try a few others at random, see if it has the same effect. Yeah, that seems like a legit way to go about doing it. Just choose a black and white film stock. Cool. Ooh, I kind of like that one. All right, excellent. Thank you for the good question. Moving on. All right, I'm going to exit out of here. Let's go back and not bother saving this. And I'm going to go into Photoshop next. Photoshop, I'm going to open up a picture here. Let's see this one. This is shot medium format digital. Actually, it's a pretty big file in here. And it's raw. It was shot on a Leica S2. This was it's a DNG file opening up in Camera Raw. And so, of course, within here, I have all my Camera Raw adjustments. I'm not going to do anything there. The image looks fine as it is. What I'm going to do now is open it not just as a regular photo, but open it as a smart object. Now, you can open it as a regular photo. That's totally fine, and that will still absolutely work. But you're going to lose one of the great advantages of working with smart objects that I'm about to show you, and that is full editability of the effect. So here's one of the things to consider when you're working within FilmPack. When you apply a look, a combination of effects, whatever, you apply a look and you hit save, it is burning that look into the file. It's always going to do a save as, obviously if it's raw, it'll have to, but the default's going to be to save as for a TIFF or JPEG or whatever, and that's it, right? If you then open that back up, you couldn't go and go, oh, I put too much grain on there, I want to back that down a little bit. Now the solution to that in a normal non-smart object workflow is to save presets as you go, and I'm gonna try and remember to do that at some point to here where I save presets to kind of use them like versions, if you will, of an image. But if you're just starting with a preset, then obviously you don't need to save a new preset. But if you start with one of the presets and you make a bunch of tweaks to it and you go, okay, I like this, but I might want to change this a little bit in the future, maybe pull the grain back a little bit, saturate a little bit more, whatever. Saving that look as a preset will allow you to return to that look even on the same photo, which you can't otherwise normally do unless you're working off of a smart object. So here's how this works. Let's turn this off. I already opened this as a smart object. Incidentally, if you open a photo not as a smart object, you can always right-click in Photoshop and there will be an option to convert it to a smart object, which I think is not going to be here now. It is there. So I could convert a smart object to a smart object. That would be clever. But anyway, you can convert anything to a smart object. And what that means now is if I go to edit the photo, let's go to, where is it? Under filters. And then I go to, here we go, DxO Labs, FilmPack 6. And by the way, when you install FilmPack, it will automatically install into all of your host apps. If incidentally, here's a good thing to know. Let's say you installed FilmPack 6 and then later you install Photoshop, the plugin that is required in FilmPack, the plugin that is required in Photoshop to open FilmPack will not be there because Photoshop wasn't there when you installed FilmPack. So reinstall FilmPack, and that will reinstall, or that will give you the opportunity to install any plugins that you might now need because you added new software to your collection. So something to keep in mind. Okay. Anyway, so I've got my smart object selected. I go to the filter menu, go to DxO Labs, and open up FilmPack 6. And it'll tell you right here to return to Photoshop, save the image in FilmPack 6 or close the window. Super important to know, if you just close the window, then it is not going to save the work that you did. So that's, important, kind of important. All right, let's, what are we gonna do here? We're gonna go for cinematic looks. That was my intention here. So I'm going to go into the filter list. So I've got this little filter list here, and currently I'm filtered by black and white. I have a preset called cinematic films in here. Now, also I want to show you something else that's kind of neat. I think that as a little bit of UI exploration, you may not have discovered this yet. Notice that these thumbnails are really, really big. And you might be thinking, hold on, they don't look that big on mine. If you go to the view menu, you have an option to display presets on 2 columns, which is the default. That's the default. Or you can say, you know what, I want bigger thumbnails. So I go, give me them in 1 column. And Shift D on a Mac is the preset for that, the shortcut for that. PC is probably Control D, or I don't know. Let's go with, that might be Shift D as well. Anyway, and then I can also even make this little column here a bit bigger. So I can go for some monster huge thumbnails in here, which is kind of great because you may not even need to apply the preset to see what it looks like. Obviously you can, and away you go. But yeah, that's kind of a cool thing to know. Now here's another little UI thing I want to show you. Notice as I apply any preset in here, it's opening up this info window. Okay, let's close that. And then I go, let's apply another preset in here. Let's just kind of scroll up and I'll go for this one. And it pops out this thing again. And at some point, you might get a little bit tired of this info panel popping out. There is an option down here that says show description automatically. I can turn that off. And now when I choose a new one, it does not do that. If I want to see the information, there's a little eye down here in the bottom left corner. Click that and it will pop that out. If you change your mind and you wish that it did pop out every single time automatically again, then simply go into the preferences and under processing, strangely, there is an option here. Here you go, automatically show preset description. There's a separate one for Time Machine. It has the same functionality, but there's separate preferences for that. So I'll turn that back on. And now when I choose a preset, it's going to automatically open that. I'm going to turn that off because I don't want it getting in the way. And there we go. Okay, so here is a preset. I'm gonna go back to my smaller thumbnails so we can see all the names. Here's a preset called Teal and Orange. This is personally one that I actually quite like. I think it's a very modern cinematic look. It's a little bit bright and airy for this particular shot, so let's tweak it because these adjustments are not all about only using the preset. You really want to get in and modify these to make it truly yours. So let's go into the modify category here. I can make this a little bit smaller here, give myself a little bit more room to work. And let's see here, what do I want to do? I want to pull back the teal. It's a little bit strong in the teal. This mountain is like super tealy. You can see some kind of highlighty teals around the horse's mane there. It's just it's a bit much. So let's back that off a little bit. Now I've got the teal and orange intensity slider here, but I think this is one of the ones that will completely freak out if I dial this back. Yeah, you see it's got it's just kind of a weird effect that happens. It has to do with the math that is making this look work. When you change the input number on the math, it just doesn't work for this photo. So sometimes you will see that. So if that happens, go, just kidding, never mind, and find a different way to go about it. So in this case, I want to back off on the teal. A good way to do that is going to be using the HSL tool and we're going to use the HSL tool on specific channels. I will go for the cyan channel, which is going to be, of course, very much a teal-like color. And from here, I can take the saturation down on that. Let's just pull it down just a little bit. If I pull it all the way down, you can see that totally goes away. Don't want that. Just back it off a little bit, pull that down, dig it. Right, that looks pretty good. Maybe I want to make the whole thing a little bit darker. Let's pull the full exposure down just a touch in there. Yeah, that works pretty good. And maybe add a little bit of vignetting to it. Let's do a little vignette. So I'll go down to Lens Effects, Creative Vignetting here, and just a touch, just a tiny bit around the edges. Okay, so let's say I think I like this. I do like this. I think I like it. Let's go up to the File menu and we choose Save, and return to Photoshop, and it saves that. We temporarily see the original image, and then boom, there we are with the FilmPack applied as a smart filter. Now, incidentally, if you're not that familiar with Photoshop and you're applying a smart filter, here's one of the cool things we can do. It automatically creates a mask. So if I select that mask and then I'll hit B to grab a brush, and let's see, yep, I've got black as my brush, I can literally brush the effect between it. So I'm creating a mask between the original version and the treated version. So that's effectively what's happening here is we're looking at the original here, a treated version here, with the ability to mask between it, which is kind of neat. Just undo that. Just FYI, in case you've never played with that before. But now let's say I decided I changed my mind. I want to try something else. So I'm going to go here to where it says DxO FilmPack, double click on that, and it is going to open up into FilmPack again, and you'll see momentarily the original, and then boom, the effect that I just applied. So okay, you might be thinking, well, hold on, this could just be where we left off without the ability to change anything. However, if we look closely, you'll see in here, let's see here where if we look at my all channels and go to my cyan one, the change that I made is in fact there. But just to really prove it, just because I know some of you out there are going, I don't believe it, I'm going to prove it to you. We're going to go to black and white film. We're going to choose some really super grainy look on here. Let's go for T-Max 3200. I'll crank it up all the way. And then I'm going to make it black and white. Look at that. I'm throwing away all the color. File, save, and return to Photoshop. Now, if I was not using this as a smart object, all that color would be gone. There'd be no getting back to it. However, let's go back into that FilmPack 6 operating as a plugin, as a smart object plugin for Photoshop. And look at that. You saw it. I'll take the intensity down, go back to color. The full image, come here, there we go. The full image is in fact still there. So really, really useful thing to be able to know. So you can apply this as a smart object, go back in here, make any changes you want at any time. And then, of course, just save and return to Photoshop, and we are back in effect. There we go. And there's our back to our color look again. So that's what I wanted to show you as coming out of Photoshop and how you can get kind of a cinematic look using those presets, and then, of course, going in and tweaking the colors to your heart's content. All right, a couple questions came up. David asks, any suggestions to get a print that looks like it was developed in a wet darkroom? So developing, okay. First of all, that means a good printer, right? Using a print house generally, you can buy obviously really, really good printers to use at home or in your studio that cost a whole lot of money. For me personally, I've never cared to own a printer of that caliber because there's so much that goes into keeping it looking the way that you really want it to look that I'd rather just pay a professional to do that. So tip number one, use a lab. Tip number two is going to be to pick a paper that has a real photographic look. Right, if you just take plain old office paper and you hit print on your inkjet, it's not going to look like it really came out of a lab, right? But if it's printed on photographic paper or photographic type of paper with a little bit of gloss, with a little bit of matte, the thick stock to it, maybe a little bit of kind of watercolory so it bleeds a little bit. There's all these different paper stocks that you can choose to print digitally on, just like you could print in a wet darkroom with, right? There's always if you used to print, you go to your photo store, your camera store, and you'd have a wall of different paper types. You had Ilford types and all these other paper types, glossy and matte and different textures and all kinds of good stuff. You bring that into the darkroom, and everyone had a different feel to it, just like film, right? Every film had a different look and feel to it. The papers did as well. But you can still print on a multitude of paper types. And if you wanted to go crazy, there are labs that will actually do digital to film stock print and then do a negative or positive print to actual paper in actual wet paper in a lab. You can do it, probably pay for it, but you can do that. But I think more it comes down to just using a lab that's using quality paper and gives you some options to choose what type of paper that you want. That's really what it comes down to. It's not about the treatment that you apply to it. It's more about the actual printing technique that you use. So that's what I would recommend. Craig says, is there a preset for Polaroid film and one that includes the large border at the bottom? So there are presets for Polaroid. There are borders. I don't know if there's an actual Polaroid border. Well, we'll look for that. I think, let me hold on, let me look at my notes. We're going to get into borders next, actually. I'm going to update my notes. Border, make sure I do that, because I was going to do light leaks and textures next, but I just added borders to that. So we'll look for that. Evan, can you do the same thing that you did with Photoshop Smart Objects with Photo Lab? You cannot. Smart Objects is a unique feature to Photoshop. I don't know if they own the patent on that or what, but that only works out of Photoshop. So unfortunately, that is the way it is. Now, what you do have, and actually not with FilmPack, so from Photo Lab going into the Nick collection, there is a checkbox to allow you to re-edit it, and then it's kind of like a smart object. It's basically storing all the metadata inside of a TIFF file, a layered TIFF file. That's invisible to you, the user, but that's how it's technically happening. That feature does not exist in FilmPack. And now that you bring that up, I kind of question why. That would obviously be a good thing to have in there, because it would give you that re-editability feature, but it might be a core thing that can't. Anyway, it's not there right now, is the short answer. Sorry. And that's it. Okay. Let's move on to, we're actually going into Photolab next. So let me, I guess I'll leave that open, and we are going to Photolab, turn off the camera, and we're going to start with this photo, come here, this photo here. All right, so this picture, make sure I've done a full reset. Oop, I hadn't, so there we go. Now it's full reset. This is, this picture already has a unique look to it because of the lens it was shot with. This is a modern digital photo, so shot on a Lumix S1. And it's funny, I thought I shot this with the S5. Anyway, shot with the Lumix S1. You'll see it says no lens here in Photolab because it was shot with an old mechanical lens. And that lens has a very kind of smeary look. You can see in the highlights here, let's zoom into 100%. You can see around the highlights, this haloing. That's all part of the lens. That came out of the lens, so that is native. That's not something to fix or undo in post. That it literally is in the picture. So I have this picture that has this beautiful kind of creamy analog look, especially around the edges. But the coloring doesn't say old analog to me. So I want to fix that. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to take this photo that already has the advantage of having this analog lens look to it. I am going to take that to the next level. First thing that I'm going to do, though, is fix it. For some reason, it's totally crooked. I don't know if I was falling over, if I was getting out of someone's way. I have no idea, but this picture needs help. Now, within Photolab, you have basic straightening tools. However, I have advanced straightening tools in here because I have Viewpoint installed. So this is an important thing to understand with Photolab. If you purchase Viewpoint and if you purchase FilmPack, and we're going to come to this later, if you purchase Viewpoint, you actually have access to its tools inside of Photolab. So what that gives me in here is, let's see, let me find the right tool. Here it is under straightening. I have this much more advanced perspective effect tool. So if I click on this button here, I will get, let me reset everything. I totally forgot to reset this earlier. There we go. If I jump into this, I get these little lines here that I can position wherever I want. So I'm going to position these lines based off of what should be straight in this photo. So I'm going to align it based off of these this wall right here. So there is my left vertical line lined up there, and I'm going to take my right hand one, and we're going to go, let's just follow this kind of black shadow line here. Should make that pretty easy to line up. There we go. And then I'll take this top one, and I'm going to line this up based off of the top of that sign in there. So again, I'm just looking for known vertical and known horizontal lines. And then the bottom one, if I look at the table, it's actually, the table's pretty straight. The lines on the floor are straight. Yep, I'm digging that. So I'm going to leave that there. I will click on apply. It will think about what it's got to do. It'll distort the image, crop it. You can see the outside crop area there. So it has distorted the image appropriately, automatically crop that out, click on close, and now I've got that image ready to go. Let's do a little bit of exposure adjustment. I'm going to pull the highlights down just a little bit. And there we go, pull down the highlights just a hair in there. And that's it. That's all I want to do here in Photolab. The rest of it I'm going to do in FilmPack. So to get there, click on the little share button down here. I already have it. See the export button, the blue export and the little app icon. This is the export to app button. However, I'm not clicking on that because I want you to see that if you don't see that button, you choose from this share menu here. Whatever you choose in here, this button becomes that. So next time you just have to click the blue button. If you click on here and choose export to disk, then this button will change to be export to disk next time you do it. If you choose export to application, it becomes export to application. So we open that up. Export to, choose your app. I've already selected FilmPack in here. That won't be there by default. So you would simply go in here and say, select an application, choose that app, and then it will forevermore be listed at the top there. And then you can change your format that you want. You're always going to want to do a TIFF. You could do a DNG. I like to do TIFF for these, 6 or 8-bit, depending on what you're doing. We're going to go for 16-bit because I don't know what I'm going to do in here yet, so I don't want to limit my options, and so on and so on. So click export. It is going to render out that 16-bit TIFF file and then open that up into FilmPack for me. All right, so first thing I want to do is give some kind of a basic film look. I'm actually going to use, let's get out of this tool. I'm going to use the time machine for this. Let's go for, let's see here, click on this again to bring up the full list. Let's go for kind of a 60s vibe. We want a 60s vibe in here and scroll through these different options in here that I've got. Photo 60, there's some really decent, ooh, this, Polaroid, right, we talked about Polaroid, so let's do that right now. So there's a Polaroid preset. Let's close this. So there's a Polaroid coloring. Perfect. This is now our new objective, to make this look like a Polaroid photo. And then I'm going to go into my additional effects in here. So I've got our Polaroid film rendering. I can increase the grain on there if I want to, but just leave it where it is. And let's go down to borders. So where are we? Graphical effects, frames rather, not borders. And let's see if there is anything really Polaroid-y in here. Let's hit P and see what happens. Nothing under P for Polaroid. Oh, these aren't really alphabetical, are they? Okay, let's just scroll through quickly. Analog light frame, classic border, offset up. I'm not going to read all these off to you because then it just sounds like I'm mumbling, which I basically am. I'm going to kind of feel like there isn't, because I'm pretty sure that all of these are evenly distributed around all edges. Yeah, I don't see anything in here that looks like a full-on Polaroid. Sorry, that would have been cool. I must admit, that would have been cool. Anyway, all right, well, thank you for the question. I'm glad we looked, and we now have an official feature request. Okay, what I do want to play with in here is texture and light leaks. So if I go to texture, by default, it says no texture. From here, I can choose any of these textures to overlay. Now, I will say that when it comes to texture, you definitely want to use this sparingly. So if I choose like, I don't know, let's do a pretty bold one like concrete. Here, let's do this big concrete here. And I crank the intensity way up. In fact, I'm going to take the grain down on this just so we can see the, let's just go to no grain. Actually, it'll make more sense. Let's go to no grain. It's just so we can see exactly what's coming from the texture versus coming from the grain. You can see there's this very obvious pattern happening in here that doesn't sell it as anything. Unless you're trying to make somebody believe this was painted onto a concrete wall, this is probably not really going to pass the sniff test. But if we look through these and find a texture and then dial it in very lightly, like let's go for stains is good. Let's go for a stains texture, and then take the intensity way down and make it very light, then it will start to look like an actual stained print. So let's zoom into one-to-one up here. This is a good example, because if we look up here on the wall, you can see a little bit of texture happening in here. If I take the intensity way up, we can see that that texture is coming from this stain texture map. But if I dial that way back, and at this point, that doesn't look believable at all, right? That's just what's way too much. But as I dial it down, you'll see that we still get some of that texture coming in here, but it becomes believable. It becomes a look that you say, okay, this looks like it's an old print that's been sitting in a drawer somewhere and has started to break down, started to fall apart. I think this highlight area on the walls is a really good place to see that. And I think this amount works very well. I think this is very believable there. If I turn this off, go to no texture, you'll see that goes away. It becomes nice and clean again. So finding just that right amount of texture and the right type of texture, depending on what you're trying to achieve, can be very, very powerful. But you just got to do it very lightly. So this is another good one with a bunch of broken up texture in here. At 100, it's way, way, way too strong. But as I back this down, we start to get that slightly more believable look. Like even there, that's too much. It just doesn't look real there. Back it off a little bit more, and there we go. Now we're hitting the world of reality. You have a randomize button in here. And what I would suggest is if you're going to play with the randomize, is to take the intensity all the way up, then hit the randomize so you can see exactly at a glance where it's going to lay its texture pattern. And then you go, yeah, that's good, because see, it just happened, it lines up nicely. I got this great texture here on the edge. Okay, that's the one that I want. Now let's take that intensity back down and find that happy space where it is ever so slightly there and believable. It's what you want. It's just believable. And then we can do the light leaks. Same idea. Go to light leaks in here, scroll down, grab a different light leak. There's tons of them in here. Actually, I really like the light leaks. I think these are kind of fun. Do something like this color leak here. Again, nice gentle wash on there. We can take the intensity way up, and it gets too much very quickly. Back it down a little bit. Let's do another one. Let's go for a color leak. That's kind of cool. I get this color wash across the corner in there. Again, bring the intensity way up to see exactly what's happening, but find its little happy place where it works out well. You can change the position of your leaks. That sounded odd. You can change the position of the light leaks on here just by clicking this little button here. Changes where they're laying out. Again, if I bring the intensity all the way up, you can see, in this case, it's kind of flipping that texture based off of which corner I'm clicking on in here. So let's see here. Actually, this one, I think it would work well coming from this corner because we already have a very washed out look on this corner. That happens to be because the sun was hitting this and hitting her as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a light leak, but that helps to sell the light leak look, right? It doesn't make sense to have a light leak here. The sun was not coming from over here. The sun was coming from over here. Now, granted, a light leak means light got into the film stock, not into the lens, but work with me here. So let's go ahead and put it in the left-hand side and back that off a little bit, and that works out pretty well, right? There you go. Dig it. Okay, so that's the idea behind the light leaks and the textures. You want to use it subtly. You want to be careful with it. You don't want to go crazy with it. Find one that works with that image, with that combination of colors and everything else you're doing, and just dial it back. Just a little kiss. That's all you want. Just a little bit in there. That's all you need. Ted asks, when exporting to an application, why not export at 300? I saw you exported at 72 DPI. Okay, let me go back and cover this. I'm going to, let's save this. So oh yeah, I wanted to show you this as well. This is going to change. This is something that I just noticed the other day when I was working with this, and I let the folks at DxO know it's already on the change list. When I was in Photoshop, I just hit Command S and it saved. When I was in Photolab itself, in FilmPack itself, where I opened it natively, hit S and it would save. Right now, if I hit Command S, it's going to do a save as. So your inclination here might be, okay, I've done this work. I know it's a TIFF file because that's what I sent here. So I'm going to hit Command S and it brings up a save as, and you're going, well, why is it a save as? The keyboard shortcut is wrong. So up here, there is save. Save as should obviously be on a Mac, Command Shift S on a PC, whatever it would be. It's not right. So anyway, if I hit save manually from the menu, now it's good. It's still going to ask the quality, but I hit save on there. It saves that down, and it will. There you go. It's saving. It's done. And I think I'm going to have to close this manually. Yep, close this manually, and now it will show up here. Here's the TIFF. It shows up here inside of Photolab. Here's the TIFF. Excuse me. There it is. There's a TIFF file showing up in Photolab with all the effects that I had just applied. So anyway, so I just wanted to show you that save command. So we were talking about the 300 DPI thing. So let me go back to this photo and go back into the export. And okay, right here, there's this resolution. And there's also this is under the resize column, right? So it says resize resolution 72, and then there's this enable resize here. Right now, because I'm not resizing the image, that number is irrelevant. It is not going to change the number of pixels in the image. This is 72 dots per inch. It's an arbitrary measurement. When it comes to digital images, it's totally arbitrary. That only matters when you hit print. So at this point, it's totally irrelevant. Now, if I hit print on an image that had a 72 DPI on my printer at home, then yes, it would print very large because it would only be putting 72 dots per inch of the printed image. But on screen, if an image starts out, let's do the math easy. let's say that you have an image that's 1,000 by 1,000 pixels square, right? 1,000 by 1,000. Excuse me. If I set that image to 1,000 DPI, 1,000 dots per inch or pixels per inch, and I hit print, it's going to print a 1 by 1 inch image. So it's going to take all 1,000 pixels of the original image and squeeze them into 1 inch. If I set that resolution to 100 DPI, it's going to print it at 10 inches. If I set it to 1 DPI, it's going to print it at 100 inches wide. But right now I'm not printing. I'm just doing digital work, so it doesn't matter. I'm not altering the image at all. It doesn't matter. In fact, if you're working with a professional printer, when you send this to them, they're going to ignore that. They don't care what you have in there. They're going to adjust as necessary for the size print that you have ordered. And if you're printing at home, when you hit print, if you're printing out of Photoshop or wherever you're printing out of, then you will have that control at that stage as well. So it doesn't actually matter in here. Now, if I click on resize, then it will actually change the pixels of the image, right? So if I said resize to 50% in here, then it is going to scale that image down. So if it started at 1,000 by 1,000, it would render a TIFF out that is only 500 by 500. So you do want to be aware of that. And actually, I got a question on the YouTube channel recently, someone saying that the photos that I'm sending to FilmPack are much smaller than what I started with in Photolab. And it turned out that they had this enable resizing checkbox turned on, and that was why that was happening. So make sure that it's not turned on. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Okay. There was one more question I wanted to hit here. Manfred says, Photolab exports RAWs as TIFF to FilmPack, right? Doesn't FilmPack as standalone version work with RAW files? Absolutely. However, any of the work that I had done here by doing the straightening, doing the highlight recovery, whatever, that would be lost, right? So what I'm sending over to Photolab, to FilmPack from Photolab here is a TIFF because I've already done work to it that I want baked into it. That's why that's happening. If you wanted to open the native raw image inside of FilmPack, then you would go to FilmPack, and just like I did in the very first demo photo with the photo of the girl, I would just navigate to that folder and open that picture from there. So in fact, I can do that, right? If I go to, I have to launch FilmPack now because it quit out because I finished working on that image. We launch it back up again. If in FilmPack, I'm already pointed at that same folder, but there is that raw photo in there. So if I wanted to edit that raw photo, I would just open that. And if it wasn't pointing at that folder, then I would just click on here, find that folder, wherever it is on my system, and off I go. So that's how that would work. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. One more that just came in, and I'll answer this one more, and then I'm going to move on. Richard says, I thought you could access FilmPack directly in Photolab. I thought when you install FilmPack, it adds extra menus on the right-hand side. Well, Richard, that is exactly where I'm going next. So thank you for queuing up the next step of my demo for me. You're amazing. All right, that's exactly what we're doing. So what he's asking, what he's saying is, let's just quit out of FilmPack here. I don't need that there anymore. What he is saying is, back into Photolab, just like how I had up here access to Viewpoint, or because Viewpoint's installed, I had access to additional features. Remember I said, also with FilmPack, it's the same thing. So all the functionality of FilmPack is actually in here. And so to the question that Manfred asked about working with a RAW file, if you wanted to maintain your raw native capability from Photolab all the way through, you would do all of your FilmPack work in Photolab directly. You give up the kind of cool swishy interface, but you still have access to all the tools. So here's how this works. All right, I'm going to do this with this photo here. Let's start off with simple presets. Over here on the left, I'm in the Customize tab in Photolab. I have my preset editor, and in there, because I've installed FilmPack, I have access to some additional presets. FilmPack presets, FilmPack Designer, black and white, color, and then Time Machine. We'll come back to Time Machine. So let's say I know I want to do color, so I go in here and I just start choosing these presets. These are the same presets that are actually I really like that one. I think it looks really cool. These are the same presets. I'm going to turn off my camera now. Same presets that are showing up inside of a FilmPack. Sorry, they're all the same presets in here. Okay, so that's cool. I got the same presets, but that's not enough, man. I want full control, right? Well, if we look over to here, let me turn off the filter here. There's a lot of adjustments that we have access to in here, of course, right? And the FilmPack specific ones show up in a couple of different places. If I go to Effects, we're going to find under the Effects tab, let's see here, we find filter. I think this filter actually comes out of it as well. Pretty sure. You've got grain, that's out of FilmPack, creative vignetting, blur, frame, texture, lightly. Those are all out of FilmPack. If I go to, where is it? This one, color, time, here we go, color rendering. All of my film stocks are in here. Digital films, cinematic films. Remember cinematic we just looked at a little bit ago. Cross-process. Let's go for color positive film. All my color positive films that are accessible in FilmPack are all right here. I have that intensity adjustment. I have all the same sliders in here. And I even have FilmPack. If I open, I even have Time Machine. If I open up Time Machine, slightly different interface here, but I can go through and go through the different eras. So let's go for something a bit more modern. Let's go for 2000s in here. And I can go through these different presets in here and I go, ooh, I like that one. Check it out. Look at the buttons. Look familiar? Click on the button, button. Who's got the button? Click that. And it has just applied that look here. Now my screen is a little bit small here. Let's see if I close this. And nope, still, just I'm trying to get a little bit more space in here. My screen resolution is set quite low, so it's a little hard to see everything at once, but I'm going to kind of push this off to the side. And let's go for this. Hit that. We see that. That actually looks really nice. We see that preset applied there. Let's go for a different one. Let's go for a different era. Let's go for the 90s. Let's go do a black and white one. T-Max 400. Click that. It applies that. So you have all that same effect in here, and it is still a raw photo. And you can go in and do all the other effects that you would normally do inside of Photolab. And since it's totally non-destructive, you can go back and change anything at any time. So this is really, really powerful. Now, what I do want to play with in here, let's reset this image, is the color renderings. I want to go back into color negative film, and just to really show you all the different film stocks that are in here. So we're in color negative. The first one is this ADOX color implosion. I've never shot with that film, no idea what that is. Let's go for some that more people might remember here, like a Fuji Pro look. There's that Fuji Pro look. The reason I chose this photo, by the way, let me go back to the compared to the original. The reason I chose this photo is because of all the colors in the top half of it. Between the blue wall and the skin tones on her and the colors on the saris here, we are seeing most of the colors of the rainbow. So as I go through these different film stocks, you'll really see how these different films render different colors differently. Can I say different one more time? You'll see how they're processed, how they're handled differently in here. And that is what makes this so special. You really go through here and you find a film stock that just handles the colors in a way that you like. And you don't have to do anything else, right? You find a look in here, you go, oh yeah, that's the one, I like it. Okay, you're done. Nothing else to do. Hit compare, go back to the original. Massive, massive difference there, and away you go. And here, again, you have that intensity. I can kind of back that off. Oh, protect saturated color. Just take the intensity off a little bit. I like this actually, protect saturated colors. That's kind of good too. So you have all these different film looks, film mimics that you can grab within here. Let's go for color positives. Let's see, I used to shoot a whole lot of Kodachrome back in the day. Ooh, there we go, 64. Oh, yeah, gosh, shot so much of that. Should have bought stock in Kodak back in the day. Actually, that's probably a bad idea because now where are they? You have all these beautiful, beautiful film stocks in here. There's true Kodachrome 64. That's what I used to use. Man, beautiful stuff. Love it. So you have all these film stocks that you can just grab in here and access very, very easily. And it's super awesome that you can do this within Photolab. You're still totally raw. You still have all the functionality in here. You just don't have the kind of the big whizzy interface, but you've got all the control. So if you are a Photolab and FilmPack user, then I would certainly recommend considering doing most of your work, if not all of your work, for FilmPack this way. Do it from Photolab because you do maintain that full editability. So going back to the question that was asked earlier about when I was showing off the Photoshop and the Smart Object, and I said that you don't have that ability to re-edit them coming out of Photolab. So that was, the question came up and I didn't want to tip my hat to what was showing here until we got to here. But if you go into FilmPack, then no, you lose that editability other than saving out the presets. However, if you stay entirely in Photolab, you don't give up any of that editability. And in fact, it's an even kind of more organic way to work than you are from Photoshop, because you don't have to go in and out of the app itself. You just have all the tools of that app right here. So some really, really nice ways to work in there. All right, let's see here. Mike is asking, can I emulate infrared film? There are some infrared presets. I'm not sure how accurate they are to if you really shot infrared film or an infrared converted digital camera, but let's try one. What category is that under? I know I've seen some. Here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat this. I'm going to go into FilmPack and just do a search in there. Because I can't search through there's another thing you can't do in Photolab is search through the individual film stock. So let's open up this shot here, and I'll go to clear out my preset search, go into search and just type in infrared, and here's what you get. So how infrared that actually looks is something only you can answer. I've only ever shot with an infrared digital converted camera once, like 12, 13 years ago or something. Super fun. I keep thinking that's something I want to do, take one of my older digital cameras and convert it. Buddy of mine converted a Lumix S1R, which is the 50 megapixel Lumix full frame, into an infrared sensor. Oh, so cool. Anyway, so there you go. You have some infrared options. Okay, let's see here. We've got one more thing to jump into, and that's going to be exploring black and white. So we got 8 minutes left. So let me hit Tom's question that just came up. Are FilmPack and Analog Effects Pro redundant? Good question. Not redundant, but they are different. And there's going to be a lot of overlap in the type of effect that you can get, but they are different. So what I would say is if I had both installed, as obviously I do here, I think that Analog Effects is a bit more explorable. It's a bit more playful in how you go about getting different looks, and it does have some features that you don't find in FilmPack for sure. When it comes to mimicking an actual old film stock look, FilmPack is a better place to go. When it comes to kind of just willy-nilly playing around and coming up with some pretty wild and creative changes to make, I would probably jump into Analog Effects Pro. Really, I think it comes down to personal preference for a lot of it. Play with both, see where you like to work more, and yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that. And Raphael's saying, what are the advantages of using FilmPack over color effects or silver effects? The biggest thing in FilmPack is the true film emulations. That's where FilmPack really stands out from other apps because it has dozens, hundreds, I'm not even sure how many, of film emulations in there. Some of those or some variation of those show up in other apps, but it's different. Now, Silver Effects Pro is still, in my mind, the absolute best way to make a glorious black and white. If you want to go in with meticulous control, you want to pretend you're Ansel Adams in the darkroom and doing super, super finite level of control, then I would still go there. But you have to want to spend the time getting there. Whereas in here, you can apply a couple of presets, grab a couple of sliders, come up with something that looks really good. If you're editing with a very specific end goal in mind, then I would say that Silver Effects is a better place to go. Again, certainly a lot of overlap, but a lot of it does come down to personal preference or what you're trying to achieve. Okay, last one we're going to do is going to be coming out of Lightroom Classic. So let's go over to Lightroom Classic, and I'm going to use this photo here. So this photo, let's see, I've already done a little basic editing to this. I'll already just go into the develop module, and I'll just reset this. So there's the native image. I'm going to do a black and white conversion on this one. Before I send it over, I want to make sure that my shadow detail is all lifted out of here. So I've got a lot of shadow here that's kind of crunched. I've got almost no colors up here in the top. So I'm just going to start with the auto button, and lo and behold, it does amazing things. And I've got a nice blue sky, and I've got some nice texture down here. So this is a good range of data to send off to black and white processing. I'm going to be sending this off as a TIFF file because I'm not going through as a smart object. So I am going to want to make sure that I don't clip anything before I send it off. So I might even want to go to my black point here and raise those up a little bit, looking at the histogram. You can also enable clipping in here to see what you are or are not clipping. And I want to make sure that I'm not clipping any data out. So there's no highlight clipping happening before I send this off to make sure I don't throw away any information. Once that's done, next we go into, where's the filters? I don't know. We're going to go in here to the help and search for FilmPack, and it is edit in FilmPack. That's right. Photo edit in DxO FilmPack 6. And because once again, it is going to be rendering this as I just suggested. So we're going to render it out as a TIFF file. It'll be 16-bit, so I will still have highlight and shadow recovery to a degree, but I really wanted to make sure I got that out while I was still in RAW. And let's send this off and play with some black and white looks. As with every other image or every other technique, there are multiple ways to go about looking for your black and white looks. So I could go into my time machine, and I could start in the early looks in here. Let's go for these kind of 1910s, 1920s black and whites. Or I could go into, let's get out of Time Machine. I could go and filter by, here we go, filter by just black and white looks. We can even combine it and say, just show me black and white legacy films or show me all black and whites, totally up to you. I don't know, is there anything that's like black and white and cinematic? No, so these combine. So let's say that I got black and white and I enable legacy, and then I also enable, I don't know, Time Machine. Okay, so there's a combined filter preset. And if I want to take out something, I click on it up here. See, as you roll over, you get a little line. Click on that, and it takes out Time Machine out of the equation. So now I have all these beautiful black and white renderings to look at. I'm going to hit Shift-D and convert this over to the single column. I'm going to make this really big on here so that I don't have to apply each one to see what it's going to look like. And I'm just going to kind of start paging down through these and looking at these different presets in here. Scroll down and look for something that I like. So, you know, it's all about just finding that beautiful black and white conversion that works for the image that you've got. So let's pick something here that works out well. Let's go for, actually I want something higher contrast. Let's go for this one. Sure. Okay, let's do this one because I want to bring some more details back into my shadows in here. So I choose this as a good black and white starting point. And then once again, go into the full editor here and let's go for the, let's see here, under contrast, we have our shadows. Let's raise up our shadows a bit and pull some of that detail into those shadows in there. Maybe it's a little bit of mid-tones work is what's needed. We find the right tonality to pull up some of that. Maybe I need to go into curves in here to really get it. Let's go into the channel, go into the curves, tone and curves, lift up the shadows. There we go. There's some of that pulling up. Pull maybe the highlights down just a touch in there and really bring that back into place. Maybe I want to play with the grain a little bit more. So go up, it's got this Fuji Neopan grain. Let's crank it all the way up to the top in here, get something really chunky, grainy, or back that off a little bit. I just want it to be really nice and clean. I want it black and white, but I want it clean. So we take that down like so. So again, the way that you can go about doing these is multifold, right? So we've got, again, the Time Machine exploration. You can just filter by your various presets and just choose to filter by, you know, just black and white. Turn off legacy here, so we're looking at all black and whites. You could search. I could go in here, and if I knew exactly what I was searching for, so let's say I wanted to do a T-Max, not T-Max. Hello, where's my delete key? T-Max. Oh, let's see here. And it's actually T-Max, so points for accuracy. T-Max, there we go. There's all my Kodak T-Max films. So I can just search by text and find exactly the ones that I want. So let's go for this T-Max 3200, a film that I have to say I really enjoyed shooting back in the day. And there you go. So you've got that good old T-Max 3200 look in there. You go, you know what? I like it, but I want more grain on there. Cool. That's cool. We go into this tool, go to our grain intensity and crank it up as much as you want to get that beautiful grain in there. And there we have it. All right, so that's how we get to our black and whites. Just like everything else, so there's a lot of different ways to find them. And then, oh, by the way, you've got, you know, you can really start to mix things up and start mixing different black and white renderings with different black and white grains. Nothing saying that you have to keep them all from the same category. You can totally mix those up in there. All right, we have another question that's popped up, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. Luke says, "Are all the..." What happened to my camera? That's weird. Well, I don't know why it's supposed to be the camera. Huh. Well, apparently, I guess you can't see me, but that's okay. I'll just turn that off and I'll answer without the camera. Luke says, "Are all the modifications you make on a raw file, including in Photolab Elite and all the plugins used, are saved in the raw file without creating a sidecar?" Oops, I scrolled to see the whole question. Without creating, sorry, my window here needs to be bigger. Without creating a sidecar like in Lightroom. Okay, no, there is a sidecar file. So let me go back to Photolab, and so I've made adjustments to this photo, obviously. I'll right click on this and choose Reveal Image in Finder, and it opens on the other window. Here it is. So there's the photo, there's the sidecar. It's called a DOP file, DxO DOP Photolab. So DOP is a DxO Photolab file. That is the sidecar file. So there you go. And that is the last question. All right, folks. We're going to wrap it up here. This is the last webinar of mine for 2021. So I don't know when I'll be seeing you all. When I'll see you again, but hopefully it'll be soon. And love y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Happy everything that there might be. Love you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you